5 today, and we're going to take some time to really look at internal controls. How are you guys doing as far as being able to see? Are you able to pull this up on your computer? The slides? The slides when you don't, Ed, have Facebook on? Ed, you know I'm teasing you, right?
He just got a cell phone.
Okay, excuse me, I'm gonna get this going here. Guys, any questions? Did you have a good break from school yesterday?
Oh, I've read this chapter all day.
Kimberly, I believe you when you said you read that chapter all day.
From 9 to 9. I'm taking those. Let's see. I'm ready to burn the clock.
Okay, so what we're going to do, if I can pull this sucker up, is we've talked about some important aspects of the audit, but what we're going to do here is really start understanding the internal controls of an environment. So here is where we start hitting part 3 in chapter 5. Really starting to understand the controls that are in place and how those controls ultimately affect the financial statements. Now, why would those controls ultimately affect the financial statement? Why? Why, if in looking for internal controls within a company, do we look at that and compare those internal controls with the potential that the financial statements could possibly be misstated?
Well, because the stronger their internal controls are, the better chance of everything being on the up and up.
Todd, you're exactly right. The stronger the internal controls, the better the chances that transactions are recorded accordingly, right? That things are segregation of duties are working appropriately, and that ultimately we want to make sure that transactions are really true, they really exist, and they've really occurred. And we want to make sure that they get recorded right and that they're valued right, they're disclosed right. So basically, the stronger the internal controls, the more we can trust that these transactions that make up the financial statements are valued right, occurred, existed, complete, all of these assertions we're going to start talking about. So internal control, or the quality or lack of quality of internal control over financial reporting, is paramount to an organization's good governance. We're familiar with companies that don't have good governance, and a lot of them aren't in business today as a result of their lack of governance. There are internal control processes that should be in place to help protect assets. Really, ultimately, the purpose of internal control is to safeguard assets. Okay? So why do we let one person open the mail and another person deposit the checks in the bank? Why do we care? We care because we ultimately want to make sure that that money is used and accounted for accurately within the organization. We don't want slippery fingers walking away with it, don't we? Do you see how that's safeguarding assets? Why do we make sure we get a good inventory count at the end of the period, and we make sure there are processes in place to protect inventory? Because is it still there? Has someone walked off with it? Is the inventory accounted for and sales occurred from those inventories that are no longer there? So it's really important we protect our assets. How many of you guys would put a $100 bill and just put it on the floor and walk away for an hour? Why wouldn't you? You're scared it's going to be gone. Internal controls in a company are to protect those assets in place. They've got a heck of a lot more than $100 at risk here, right? They've got all kinds of things. And there is even a sense of internal controls that people operate efficiently. we're not just talking about fraud and pilfering, but we're talking about that people really even conduct their work in a manner that's efficient for the company. Internal controls are needed because there are risks out there. Corporate failure. What happens when there is continually stealing of assets? They're going to go down, right? It's not going into profits, it's going to go down. Corporate assets can be misused, meaning they're not utilized for the right purpose. And ultimately, if financial statements aren't prepared according to generally accepted accounting principles and we can't trust those transactions, we've learned in prior chapters, as an auditor, we're at a lot of risk, aren't we? What's the potential risk we could have?
Well, you could do the audit and then get sued because you were part of it when someone else finds them.
Exactly. So we don't want liability issues and be paying out because we didn't do a diligent effort in really checking the auditing firm. There is a framework. This is important to know. COSO, Framework for Internal Control. This is something that's been put into place that our job as auditors isn't just to file an audit report. Part of that report, we need to report on the internal controls. And so the reporting objective is to really take the time to look at internal controls and understand an assessment of potential risk issues, to see the control environment and control activities, to gather that information and communicate it, and to see that internal controls are monitored, okay, accordingly. So know about this COSO framework. We're going to be talking about it in this chapter. It's an internal control guideline because internal controls ultimately are created to hopefully provide reasonable assurance that we will have reliable financial information. It's to protect our assets, to comply with laws and regs within that specific industry, and ultimately to operate efficiently and effectively. So these internal controls are in place for safeguarding assets, ultimately trusting the financial statements, and granted, we're doing this for the public, but the different agencies that report to these organizations are going to have an interest in this information. And again, the better or the more that a company can operate effectively and efficiently, the more profitable they'll be. Do we agree on that for the most part? So as we talk about internal controls, there are, and we saw that COSO chart, identification of organizational risks that affect the accomplishment of objectives. We've got to take our specific company or the company that's being reviewed and look at potential risks that could hinder safeguarding of assets, that could hinder the financial statements being reported appropriately, that could hinder operating efficiently and effectively, and that could hinder the regulations required by other entities. We need to see that the control environment, how was it designed? We need to look at the control activities that a particular company has in place to detect errors and prevent errors. Now, have you guys ever worked at a company where there are guidelines you must follow? How many of you need to clock in and clock out? Why do you have to do that? Why don't they just trust you? A couple things. First of all, they want to pay you what you worked, and that's a guideline in place for it becoming more accurate. Secondly, what happens if you work overtime? You need to get paid time and a half. It's not optional, is it? And so in some respects, using an external system is going to make sure you get paid how you need to get paid, right? or don't get paid if you didn't work it. What are some other items in place that help protect, set up in the control environment? Can anyone just go and deposit cash? Aren't there guidelines in place for certain departments to handle certain aspects of a company? Okay, so things are in place for a reason to make sure it runs efficiently, effectively. I know there are guidelines in place as far as what if a company really likes what you're doing and they give you a full paid vacation for 3 weeks to Cancun. What can happen there? What conflict could possibly happen? Are you getting paid from a potential client or from your boss? From the company? From the company. So a lot of times there are guidelines in place or controls in place that you cannot receive gifts in excess of a certain amount. Why? Because it may impair your objectivity as an employee, right? Who's your loyalty to? Communicate policies effectively through information and communication processes. Is the company good at really communicating and posting the guidelines that need to be in place for activities? And do they monitor the controls to make sure they run effectively? Do you guys remember me telling you about the Mayo Clinic and how they looked at some internal controls? And one of the internal auditors created a little ploy. He opened up a P.O. box and he started sending invoices to different departments at the Mayo Clinic. And he had different levels of kind of pushing their buttons. Some he started sending certified, stamping, if this isn't paid within a certain amount of time. They were all bogus. But I believe it was about 90% of the various invoices he sent to them got paid. They were totally fake. Was he monitoring the effectiveness of the controls?
Yes.
What did he find out?
They weren't effective.
They were non-existent, weren't they? There should be controls in place in order to make sure we're only paying for those items we're paying for, and the person who authorized it can sign off on those things. Do you see how that is a manner in which they were monitoring the internal controls in place at Mayo, and they were disheartened to find that they're inefficient or non-operative? There are components in place to look at internal controls. Risk assessment, the process designed to identify and manage risks that may affect its ability to achieve those objectives. Objectives being safeguarding assets, objectives being financial statements are recorded right, the I'm slipping, but to make sure that really we're operating efficiently and effectively. The control environment is the big umbrella of how the attitude is, how the climate is in the company, and how they view internal controls. Do they have an attitude of, guys, we are wanting to be ethical here. We care about this company. We want the best. Or is it a dog-eat-dog atmosphere? A lot of times that tone at the top, that culture, really plays down to all the individuals. The way management attitude is depicted filters down everywhere. One thing we're seeing at Built Right, not that we know a lot about our little friend, Leighton, but what are some things we can sense about his tone? Anybody?
You mean from
From the Built Right?